Is this any better, anyone?
Do you want to just say a few more words?
Yeah, can you hear me now? Is that better?
Seems better, yes, Helen.
Yes.
Cool.
You're just breaking up occasionally. It's not like you're unintelligible. It's just not it's not a smooth speech.
Hang on, one sec.
Hello, Arno. Hello, Olivier.
Hello, Nancy. How are you?
Very well, thank you. And you?
Very good, thank you.
Leslie, thank you very much for doing this. It's been
It was
lovely to
very
hear from you.
interesting. It went well.
Yeah, it's been great.
Yeah.
But now what am I supposed to do? How am I going to possibly, follow all of you all?
We're so keen to hear your presentation. Tax is always very interesting.
Thank you very much. I will try to make it so. I'll try to say something useful.
You're on mute, Helen.
Is that better? Can you hear me now? Is it better?
Much better.
Hey.
Ready to start when you are, Helen.
Oh, okay, super. Oh, now everybody can hear me. That helps, doesn't it? Right. So welcome back, everybody. Midday GMT. I'm delighted to introduce Nancy Bixham, the next to do the next session of the IFAB 2020, focusing on tax and legal issues, essential for all of us. Nancy is a lawyer with substantial practical experience in international charity fundraising and law, and has been advising clients with private trusts, foundations in all financial and tax-related issues. Nancy is experienced in the evaluation of organisational needs and provision of appropriate and cost-effective actions, general management, accounting, new business development, and all things to do with international fundraising. So Nancy, it's lovely to have you here. And the floor is yours.
Thank you, Helen. And as the Managing Director of Chapel in York, may I just say thank you to all of our speakers and panelists for coming today and being so brilliant, and to our participants for being with us. Also, I suppose, though, it does give me a lot of, there's a lot I have to live up to after such brilliant remarks in the last couple of hours. So I'm not sure the tax and legal actually is as interesting as some of the innovative fundraising things we've been talking about. But the issue with international donors, of course, or major donors anywhere, is that if there are tax benefits available, they want them. And the job of the fundraiser is not necessarily to understand their complete tax issues, but to be able to at least help provide answers if there are some. So I'm going to do a little bit of a lot of things here as a bit of a taster. I want to talk just generally about sort of tax benefits around the world. They kind of go into three areas. First of all, the US model, where there's a tax deduction, where the donor gets to reduce their tax when they give to a charity. It usually has to be a local charity, so it's got to be in the States, of course, to a US 501c3, which can then use the money to give internationally. And that works well. And most of Europe, of course, has a fairly similar kind of thing, with the exception of places like Sweden and all. Same thing, Hong Kong, you can give to a Hong Kong charity, which can use the funds for other purposes. Other countries have limitations. So places like Australia, others, their tax deduction, Singapore is limited for things which benefit their local communities. I would mention, however, for those of you who are interested in Singapore, that our foundation out there, which I'll talk about our foundations in a moment, but there are other things we can do that will help you in terms of Singapore, even though you can't just bring the money wholesale. There's scholarships that can be given out of Singapore. There's research and development, which can be funded with huge tax benefits, 2.5 or 3.5 times the donation. So there are some ways around it in Singapore. Then there are the oddities. And that is the UK, which doesn't have a tax deduction for the donor. It's got gift aid. When a donor makes a donation in the UK, if you give £100 to a charity, the charity is able to reclaim the tax from the UK government, £25. So it's a huge, it's a wonderful benefit for the charity. There's a slight benefit to a donor in the UK, depending on what kind of rates they're on, but most of the benefit goes to the charity. And then Canada, who is trying to be the most painful country in the world, and I think they are starting to succeed. They've got a whole different system. They've got, first of all, the benefit is great because unlike the US, for example, you get to take your tax benefit against the actual tax that you're paying, as opposed to reducing your taxable income. But the actual foreign charity that's going to get the money has to be is seen by Revenue Canada as the agent for the Canadian organization. So there's a bit more paperwork that's required there. So generally, I would say a good 2/3 of the world, there are tax deductions available. Of that, and in almost every case, you're going to have to give to a local charity to get the tax benefits. I'm going to talk about what we've done and how we can help with that in a moment, but I just want to do a couple of other just oddities around the world. So obviously a lot of people on this seminar are fundraising in America. And I think the words planned giving comes up a lot, and particularly in the major gift or major donor context. So I just wanted to take a few minutes to talk about what major gift fundraising in the US is all about. It doesn't exist anywhere else. It's a series of very high-level tax benefits that big gifts get in America. And the reason I'm mentioning this is that if anybody is fundraising in the States, it is absolutely worth your organizing to offer planned giving. It's not difficult. You do need a U.S. entity, but we'll talk about that in a moment. But there are very simple things that need to happen. And in terms of language, I would recommend that a great way of starting with it is to look at some of the U.S. charities, because they all have planned giving, the big ones. Have planned giving on their website. So there's a lot you can steal from what people in America are doing, but you're probably not offering a lot of things because it encompasses everything from donations at death, which they call bequests. We call legacies, the Australians call them bequests, to life insurance, to very interesting trusts that give very strange benefits. So for example, there's something, and this is probably the big one that you might want to know about, which is called a charitable remainder trust. And that's where a donor puts money into a trust. You get the money when they die or after a certain number of years, but they're entitled to the income from that trust. So it's a great benefit to be able to say to somebody, please give us this $1 million donation, but you're still going to get the income from it during a period of time, because that means they're not having to give up everything to make this donation. They're still getting benefit out of it. So, you're not going to be a planned giving expert, but if you are fishing in the American waters, it's at least worth knowing that for big donations, you need to at least be able to say, we can sort out planned giving for you, if that's something which would be useful, because all these things are all about, of course, making a level playing field. Because if you're competing with an American entity that's able to offer these benefits, you want to be able to offer them as well. So it's in the States, major gift fundraising, plan giving. Please make sure you at least understand it enough to be able to bring it into the mix of what you're talking about there. The next thing I want to talk about, and I will share my screen if I can do so, is this whole question of whether you need or want to, how do you get the money? So do you need to set up your own entity in a country versus using an existing charity? I will hold my hand up. We've been doing this for years. 25 years now, I've been setting up charities around the world. And in the last 5 or 6 years, I've started to believe that I don't think that really, unless there's an absolutely brilliant reason for having an entity in another country, that that's the way to go. The reason why I think so is because as charities are becoming more highly regulated in countries, it's becoming much more expensive and much more difficult to deal with them. And then the other big thing is banking. I mean, I think at Chapel York, we probably spend about half our time trying to sort out bank accounts, getting somebody on a bank account, taking somebody off a bank account. I mean, charities for some reason are seen now as the worst client a bank can have. So that, I mean, these are really bad issues to have to deal with. And I'm just going to, I've got this, if anyone's interested in it, I'm very happy to send it to anyone, but it's about whether having, whether using a foundation that's in the country is worth it versus a legal entity. And Chapel York's now got 7 of these things because in major markets, the US, the UK, now Canada, the Netherlands, Switzerland, Singapore and Hong Kong, where there are, really useful things we can do in those countries. We can really add value. But again, when you're looking at it, this document is really about, do you want to be doing, and again, I'm just going to get my highlights in here, because having your own entity means you're stuck with the regulatory requirements. You're the ones that have got to deal with it. You've got to have a board, and I'm going to come on to boards in a moment because I think people see them in very interesting ways. You've got to have insurances. I mean, bizarrely, in countries like the States and America, you've got to have an address because they still send checks around the world, to pay for things. So somebody's got to do it. And, over the years, people have said, well, my board is going to do the address. They're the ones that are going to send the thank you notes, etc. But what do you do when they're on holiday? You can't shout at them and say, how dare you do that? It's not professional for something to sit around for 3 weeks. And we have some clients who don't seem to care if it does, and others who obviously with proper stewardship want to make sure that every check is looked at instantly, because you want to steward the donor when a donation, particularly a big donation, comes in. But so physically you need to have an address. Bank accounts. Bank is now a 4-letter word. Absolutely horrific to deal with them. I'm sure that there are lovely banks out there, and I will be at some point wanting to know who they are. There are advantages. If there is a check, it's written directly to the entity which says Friends of You versus something some other organization. But you've got to have bookkeeping. You've got to have donation processing. You have more flexibility, however. It's your board, it's your people that are involved. And then the questions are about, of course, become about money. Is it worth it? How much money are you having to pay to an intermediary like a Chapel York Foundation versus no charge if it comes to your own? And then finally, there's some intangibles out there. Every now and then we find a donor who says, I am not giving to something that's not you. And most of I would say 99.9% of the times in the last 25 years, we've had this situation. A donor understands the situation perfectly. And they actually think it's probably a good idea not to have your own. But every now and then, we have to say somebody is going to give you problems. They may be less confident. Depending on the intermediary you use, you may have more or less visibility. Some intermediaries are incredible. I mean, there is one in America that deals with universities and schools. And they're free, but they don't tell you anything about a donation when they come in. You have no idea until the money comes to you. And still people feel that that's appropriate. Other people wouldn't touch it with a barge pole. So there's again, how you feel is appropriate. And there may be legal restrictions, etc. So there are good and bad about both, but I have literally, after 25 years of this thing, I am absolutely of the opinion that unless you can convince me that there's a really brilliant reason for having your own entity, I think they are a distraction. They are a distraction because when you go over to see people or you go to a board meeting, you're not talking about fundraising. You're dealing with regulatory issues. You're dealing with making sure your board is operating properly. And most people that get stuck with these entities are fundraisers that don't know even what how you would run a charity in your own country. So doing it in another country is even harder with all the requirements. And then you've got this wonderful thing called a board, which some people see as the answer to all their problems in another country. The board is going to cultivate their donors. They're going to steward their donors. In some case, they're even going to find the donors. To me, that has happened out of the hundreds of organizations we've been running over the years. I've probably seen it about 5 times where that relationship works really, really brilliantly, where they are doing something. But when you think about it, your board they're not professional fundraisers. You wouldn't let just anybody deal with things in your own countries. Why would you let them do that? Why would you want that to happen in another country? And then you spend time being nice. So then you have this strange situation. Some boards really want to do something. They're very enthusiastic. But then that becomes volunteer management. You've got to manage that enthusiasm. Because if you don't feed the enthusiasm, then you have people who are feeling unhappy that they're not being allowed to help you, and even though they're absolutely enthusiastic to do so. If you give them too much power, then you've got people going off doing things that may not be aligned to the strategy that you want to do in that country. So they are both the best and the worst, I think. So if I were to, and then I will just add that there is also a sort of sense out there that the gold standard for international fundraising is to set up your own entity and to hire somebody in that country that's going to be your fundraiser, part-time or full-time. Again, in a sort of strange world, that sounds like a good idea, but again, it almost never works. Reason? Because the fundraiser that you hire is almost none of them are very, very good at fundraising for international things. They're really good at fundraising for their local charities because that's what most fundraisers know and understand. And to find somebody who's good at international fundraising is very rare. Second problem is that most fundraisers are used to working in a bigger shop. So you take them out of the shop with all the other people that have surrounded them, the marketing people, the writers, the Valentinas of the world, all those people, and you stick them in an office by themselves and say, okay, fundraise for them, talk to these people, is often, a disastrous thing. And I've seen it again and again with very huge organizations. Okay, there are some that do have big shops over there. So, fundraising for Oxford is all over the place. They've got big things, but most charities, even most universities, schools, arts organizations don't have the ability to bring that kind of firepower to a country. So I think my feeling here, and what I kind of want to leave you with on this, is that please be very cautious before you rush around the world setting stuff up. I have closed as many almost as I've opened. mean, we had a wonderful cathedral came to us and said, we really want to set up this 501c3 in America, or was it Section 88 in Hong Kong, one of the two. And we said, why? And they said, well, because every other cathedral has one. And, you know, that's the wrong answer. The right answer is because we're going to do a very sustained, major, not gift fundraising, but major activities in the country that is going to require so much people that we're going to have an office and we're going to be doing lots of stuff, and that almost never happens. So we embarked on a process about 6 years ago now of setting up these foundations around the world, because we really felt that we could add value to the international fundraising community with having these local organizations that really understood fundraising, because the EDs like Helen are, and like Olivier, are fundraisers. So they understand where we think you're coming from to be able to understand what kinds of things you need in terms of cultivation, stewardship, on the ground events, etc. And you know, we hope that they are providing a good option. We've got hundreds now of members, which is really exciting, and we can do special things. So, for example, our US and UK charities are linked, so that if you've got an American that's paying tax in both the UK and the US, the American gets a tax deduction in the UK. Tax deduction in the US plus gift aid in the UK. What a great deal! You know, which you couldn't do on your own. So there's some special stuff that we're able to do because we've got this whole family, which means it's a one-stop shop as well. So that's my kind of 20 minutes, I think, on tax stuff. I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm happy to keep going on other things. You know, we know, for example, that China is still a disaster in terms of trying to get money out. We know that India, it's possible to get money out of India. It's also possible to get money into India, but they're equally problematic. So I'm very happy to answer any specific questions of any specific countries or any specific issues you might have. Helen?
Thanks, Nancy. That was a whole lot of information there. We haven't had if anybody does want to ask any questions, then please do send it in the chat. One thing that's come through from Chris is that he set up a 501c3 himself, so he's kind of done it himself, and he's reaping the rewards and being very happy about it on the chat. So he's kind of reiterating what you're saying about it's good to look internationally for fundraising, but personally speaking, having set up a foundation myself and having experiences of it, yeah, it might seem initially like a good idea at the time, but actually going through the process of setting up the entity, getting the bank accounts, recruiting a good board, you know, it's actually the nuts and bolts of putting it together. It's a big task. So if the resources are there, then you might as well make the best use of it, and especially with Chapel in York, obviously because we're here from the organisation, but we have a lot of experience of dealing with the tax and the legal issues, the financial issues, coupled with family that we have internationally that can also help with fundraising, but also advice internationally as well. So a few people are asking for the document that Nancy's shown, and we can definitely send that through to everybody that wants to. We're getting asked.
Can I mention to Chris Lomas, I mean, who's written a very interesting thing, saying he's just secured a third-party 501c3. There is no such thing. So what you think you've got, you don't have. If you think that you've got, so what you may have is this US-based organization that supports overseas missions, but you can't say you've got a 501c3. And I think a lot of this language and things is really difficult, and you know, and can cause problems. So what you may have is the opportunity to accept tax-effective donations, but you don't have a third-party 501c3. I might also say that in the States, because that's always of interest, that whilst the individuals are getting tax deductions, foundations in America have a legal obligation to give to certain types of organizations. And so whatever intermediary organization you use, and a lot of you will use King Baudouin Foundation for European organizations, they've been around a long time and have a very good relationship, although it's limited to Europe and Africa. But there's several good options in America. King Bodwell Foundation, CAF America, and some other ones as well. But I just highly encourage everybody to at least take a look at that, because for the chap, for example, who's just set up the 501c3, there is a lot of issues about keeping it and making sure you're a public charity and not a private foundation and all that kind of stuff. Sorry, Helen, go back to you.
No, it's fine. No, it's fine. No, I reiterate that too. Again, knowing from the Dutch Foundation that we work very hard to keep our ABI status, and I'm sure it's the same in the States and all over. Somebody's asked about the countries we work in. So again, to reiterate, we work here in the Netherlands, but also the UK, America, Hong Kong, Singapore, Canada. I think that's all of them.
Yes.
And the US, sorry, of course. We've been asked a question about how do you fundraise, or I think it's a bigger question that will take a lot of time, or it's something that we need to take offline. But how do universities in sub-Saharan Africa raise funds from countries like the UK or US? I think that's a question for a bigger conversation. But if you want to reach out to us, then we can definitely answer that. But I'm just, again, as always, conscious of time, and because that's quite a big question. Maybe Louis, we can take that offline and we can answer that offline. But another question is, do the panel have any suggestions on how the benefits of the board, i.e. making connections with different charities whilst not having your own charity in the US? So the question is, does Nancy or the panel have any suggestions for how you can still have the benefits of a board, i.e. making introductions and getting closer connections, whilst not having your own charity in the US?
I mean, can I just say that a board is just a legal group, as just a group of people that are legally constituted to look after things. Have a ambassador council. Have people who are really keen on what you're doing. Put them together. Give them a job title. Just don't give them a legal responsibility to run a charity. And because I think that's what you're really looking for in the country, is people who will offer you help and advice, but you don't need to give them a legal responsibility to do so. But give them a job title. People love it.
Mm-hmm. Sarah said that she's interested in hearing more about, I love your name, Sarah Disney, what a great name. I'm interested in hearing more about the situation of outgoing philanthropy in China and India. Again, I think that's a bigger conversation, because there is a lot of happening in Asia. And actually we got the Asia IFAB happening on Thursday. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's happening on Thursday.
Asia Pacific is on Thursday, yes.
Yeah. So if you want to tune in to the Asia Pacific IFAB, then please do. I think that'd be a really interesting day for that topic. Graham, you want to add to the conversation?
Thanks, Helen. Just to add to what Nancy said early on, I mentioned we have advisory boards, a couple around the world, and we have one in North America. And their focus is primarily to help me mobilize my North American community and help me raise money from my North American community for our major capital campaign. They do not get involved in any legal work, and I don't have to find trustees, etc., like I did at a previous school where I did set up a 501c3. That was a long time ago. The advisory board is literally getting back to everything we've discussed today. It's meeting people, connecting, it's getting to know them, bringing them on board, met them at events, at a dinner, a small dinner for 3 people. They knew someone who knew someone, and they've become my hugest and biggest advocates, and they've brought other people onto the advisory board. So why do I call it advisory? I don't report into them. It's not my campaign board, but they are hugely supportive of the work that I do. So Nancy's absolutely right. You don't need to, because you don't have your own 501c3, doesn't mean you don't have a board of volunteers. They've just got a different focus.
Thank you. Thanks for clarifying, Graham. Last thing to Nancy, and then we're going to move on to John, who I see has joined us. So thank you for joining us, John. So Nancy, the last question is, somebody's asked if you can expand a little bit. So Birdie has asked if you can expand a little bit on how US donors can claim tax benefit in the States. plus gift aid in the UK.
Yeah.
So if you can reiterate, that'd be great.
Okay, so the US person gives to the UK, Chapel in York's UK Foundation. And because the US Foundation owns the UK Foundation, they then, because they get donations to the UK, for UK purposes, it's a UK charity. It can reclaim the tax in the UK because of some jiggery pokery, which I didn't just say, if any IRS people are listening, because of some specific rules that we can do, that gift also qualifies for a US tax deduction. So because American citizens are liable for US tax because of citizenship, they get that double hit. So they get gift aid in the UK and a tax deduction in the US.
Fantastic.
Which again, is just great.
Yeah, it's a double
Okay.
whammy. It's all good. So I want to move on now, but I just want to say a lot of people have asked for the documents that Nancy showed in her presentation to be shared, and we can definitely do that. We can share that to everybody that wants to. Also, I mentioned that IFAB today has been about Europe and Africa, because we've got Leslie from South Africa joined us. So today's been about Europe and Africa. Tomorrow is IFAB focusing on the US, and then Thursday is going to be focusing on Asia. So if you would like to continue your information and hearing all about IFAB and international fundraising with it's the same subject. So we're talking about, prospecting, cultivation, stewardship, tax and legal, but in different regions. So please do feel free to tune in to those regions tomorrow and Thursday. Also, after John's talk, which is going to happen any second now, we are also taking more questions. So during John's talk, please do feel free, as well as listening to him, please feel free to send me your questions in the chat, and also on Chapel in York Connect, and we'll be open to discussion and questions at 1 o'clock. So for now, all that housekeeping done, I want to hand over to John Pepin. John, I'm delighted, has joined us. He's got 20 years experience as a social entrepreneurial consultant, working internationally with over 300 charities, social enterprises and infrastructure support organizations and professional associations. He spent over 15 years as a chief executive of a variety of Canadian charities, social enterprises and associations. He is now the chief executive of Philanthropy Impact, who at Chapel in York are keen to develop a better relation, or develop our relationship with. It's Philanthropy Impact's purpose is to increase the philanthropic giving and social investment, and to encourage impact investing across Europe by working with professional advisors to ultra high net worth and high net worth individuals to grow and enhance the quality of support they give to their clients, the UK's wealthiest individuals, around philanthropy and social impact investment. So we've been talking with WealthX about the ultra high net worth individuals, and Philanthropy Impact works with them as well. So Philanthropy Impact is a membership organisation for private client advisors, wealth management, private banking and independent financial advice, tax and legal sectors, as well as social enterprises. The organisation acts as a knowledge hub and a centre of excellence, offering events, special knowledge sharing, training, voluntary standards and sector and government liaisons. We're very pleased to welcome John as our bonus session speaker, and John's actually going to be talking about how we as fundraisers connect with these advisors and these ultra high net worth individuals. So John, the kind of topic or his subject heading is changing the culture and behavior of major donor fundraisers. So treating donors as clients. So John, over to you.
Well, you just took away everything I wanted to say. Okay.
Oh, sorry.
I know, I just teasing. I know you're not supposed to start with an apology. Can you see the screen? It's a slide showing. Oh, good. I know you're not supposed to start these things with an apology, but I'd like to start with one. I'm just getting over coronavirus and I had been hospitalized. And so my level of enthusiasm and is not quite as high as normal. So if you find me just sort of, then please understand. Okay, so we received a number of complaints when we get wealthy people together in the same room to talk about how we can all work together to increase philanthropic giving and how we can move wealthy people to more impact investing, more ESG investing, there's always at least 1, 2, or 3 in the room who basically say we don't give anymore to charities because of how fundraisers have treated us. So they haven't treated us as clients, they've treated us in quote unquote as donors. They didn't look after our needs. We didn't feel understood, or just some of the comments that they make. On the other side, professional advisors, who I'll list in a minute, they have complained, a lot of them have complained because we have events where fundraisers are invited, anyone can come to our events, but instead of coming in and developing relationships, which is a more important approach, they actually corner people and advisors and start to do mini pitches, and it turns them right off. They also try to get access to their clients, which of course is not going to happen, and they're not looking at developing, which we're going to talk about, becoming a trusted partner and resource to professional advisors. So that's pretty well it. So the purpose of today is I'm taking 6 hours of training and putting into 25 minutes. So we're going to just touch the surface of it. But the whole idea of this is to improve fundraising. If you think in terms in the UK, for example, ultra high net worth and high net worth individuals, the median gift a year and a half ago was £4,000. That meant half of the wealthiest people in this country gave less than £4,000. And there's a potential out there for fundraisers to raise considerably more. You're hardly scratching the surface. So the idea of working with professional advisors is to actually look at how you can improve your results. I'm going to talk a tiny bit about what a professional advisor does, looking at becoming a trusted partner with them, and then also just to touch on how you can have meaningful discussions with your clients. So every time I use the word clients, I'm replacing that for donors. So professional advisors are made up of wealth managers. These are to ultra high net worth, wealth managers, private banks, tax, legal, financial advisors, family offices, which are really increasing influence in this whole area of impact investing, and also in philanthropy, and professional philanthropy advisors. There's hardly any of those around. And I think that fundraisers, major donor fundraisers, can play that role stuff. So, and why are we focusing on advisors? Well, we did quite extensive research. We looked at the top 383 firms in the UK, and we looked at 503 internet interviews with wealthy people. And basically, you can see the first point that the considerable amount of giving of the 3 to 4 plus billion comes from people who are advisors. But also we came across this really interesting thing as one example. If you're supported, ultra high net worth, if you're supported by your clients, if you're supported by your advisors, then you tend to give 17 times more. So a difference between, in one example, of 335,000 to 19,000. So it's really, so we see them as a key role in increasing giving. And there's been other studies to support that kind of stuff. So trusted advisors, what do? Okay, so basically they put their clients first. So what they're trying to do is to find out who they are, what their money is for, what does it mean to them, and most importantly, and the most difficult discussion, is what their values are, what their motivation is, what their ambitions are, what's their vision, what's their goals. And this kind of conversation is an essential part of establishing a strong long-term relationship with their clients. And so what they ultimately wish to be is their trusted advisor and the first call. And there are examples of charities in the UK who have taken this approach and have become the first call, which gives a tremendous advantage to the fundraisings and to their department. It leads for advisors, it leads to client retention, and which is a lot cheaper than finding new clients, but it also leads to referrals. The other thing to keep in mind is that fundraisers can work with professional advisors supporting them, and I want to talk a bit more about that. So I'm not going to go into detail in this, but you'll have to give me a sense of time because I'm in a strange office and I'm not quite sure where I am. But if you want to see a lovely view, can you see that? Okay.
Where is that, John? Where are you?
In the middle of the city in London.
Oh, lovely.
So you can see, I don't know what you can see there, but you can see St. Paul's and you can see all the high rises and stuff.
Beautiful. Anyway, you have time, so carry on. It's super interesting.
All right. So and feel free to ask me any questions you want to ask as we're going through this. Okay, so basically advisors are bombarded by asks. Charities come to them and want corporate sponsorship. They want event participation. They want charity of the year, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that you can play a significant role in helping them to manage these kinds of situations, which puts you in a brilliant position to work with them and their clients, which gives you an opportunity. So for example, there was one charity here who had someone who was a potential major donor, and they also worked at getting advisors involved. And this major donor became, because of the advice that they were receiving as a philanthropy advisor, came to them and said, I'm looking for a lawyer to help me to do X, Y, and Z. And so because they had a strong network of professional advisors, they were able to make some recommendations. Therefore, this person ultimately became a very strong supporter of the organization, but those advisors also helped to them access other people to deal with issues. So some of the key learnings from this is, whoops, too far. It's important to understand the client's journey from an advisor's perspective. So it's not about me trying to focus on my charity and raising tons of money. And I have helped charities raise a lot of money. It's more identifying where you can add value. And I'm going to talk in a bit about the 23 distinct services that a donor needs on their donor journey. And so it's you have to recognize that advisors are impartial. They will not recommend to their clients or try to get their clients to give to certain causes or to even do certain kinds of investments, etc. And you as a philanthropy advisor would be acting in the same way. You're impartial, you're supporting them. Ultimately, they decide to support your organization, and you can work towards that. But at the same time, there's a certain level of impartiality, especially if you're working directly with advisors. So how do you get advisors involved with you? Well, it's pretty difficult in some cases, but sometimes you can organize events, and you might have some advisors on your board or some of your advisors who are supporting your major donors. So you work through them to network and then get them to come to events, etc. You can collaborate with other organizations. So for example, Philanthropy Impact, we did have until coronavirus hit us, we did have events which have networking opportunities. Well, this gives you as a major donor fundraiser an opportunity to not only speak, but also to get to learn and meet and establish relationships with professional advisors. And there's other ways as well. The second issue about the key learnings is internal buy-in. this is a major problem because many fundraising organizations are target driven. And so they should be, but at the same time, if you're doing this, you're going to be establishing relationships, and it takes a lot of time and effort and energy. And so it's a long-term kind of thing. Part of this whole deal is to adjust KPIs, but also to, in effect, adjust the culture of the organization. So the chief executive, the head of fundraising, et cetera, just don't focus on how much money you brought in, but also what are relationships, how they're being developed, and that kind of thing. And it's important to have an internal business case to put this forward, and there's different ways of dealing with that. This slide basically just reiterates what I was talking about, which is you create a network of professional advisors who can support, you can support, and they can support you. You have knowledge, you have a lot of knowledge to share that can be used by professional advisors. And then you then support your clients and their clients and them in the processes of working with, supporting them on their donor journey. And again, the values, life goals, etc., come up. So that's just a way of expressing what I've been saying. What are the benefits of being a trusted advisor? Well, part of it is it enables you to have discussions with your clients on a different level. So discussion about what their wealth is for. Notice the focus is on them, not on you and your organization. Well, that's important to also include. So you get to know the donor better, you get to establish a relationship. It also allows you to engage with the different generations within the family, and helping them to manage the diverse goals. I was in a conversation just before this where there was a family discussion and in a public event, and the family member who was in their 20s was taking a really quite strong approach around sustainability issues and impact investing and philanthropy. And the parents had no idea that there was a big difference between what they did and because of course they were making money from oil, et cetera, as part of their investments. So it was really quite interesting. So you actually can play a pretty significant role in helping to bridge those gaps. It allows you to engage with prospects through advisors. It helps to retain clients, which I've mentioned before, enhance existing relationships, and facilitate client acquisition. I'm sort of going through this pretty quickly. So again, if there's any questions, just let me know. So we've talked a bit about the role of advisors and how you can play a role and support professional advisors and help them on in their work. But why should you provide philanthropic support? Because in effect, I'm saying you're in effect an advisor supporting advisors, but you're also a philanthropy advisor supporting your clients through their donor journey. Well, there's lots of research that's come out recently. Our research clearly demonstrated, as others have, that clients want guidance and support from their advisors on their philanthropy journey. So they just, and they no longer want just a financial return, but they're values-based, and they see philanthropy and impact investing as major ways of achieving this. And it's good for your business, it's good for the advisory business if you provide support on that donor journey. There's one additional thing that's really important to this process, is the shifting values of millennials and women of wealth. So women of wealth now control about 50% of the liquid assets. It's expected in 2 generations, it'll be 70%. And millennials, of course, are going to be inheriting a great deal of money, whether you're in the UK, US, or other countries. And their whole approach is really quite different. I'll give you an example. So there's a a young millennial that we have contact with who basically their family office after their father died was traditional in the approach of their investing and running their businesses. This person really didn't like what was going on and the lack of philanthropy and the lack of impact investing. So they basically took all their money out of the family office, still involved with the family, but and set up their own family office and their own approach to giving. Now, there's a real issue for them because they are using advisors who are traditional in the approach. And so when they try to get the advisors to shift to give them advice on what they can do around their philanthropy to achieve their sustainability goals and what they can do about impact investing, they're just not reacting. So they fire them. So, I mean, it's really changing. So if you're a fundraiser and you're not meeting the needs of millennials and women of wealth, then you're not going to be able to raise the kind of funds that you want. So they want more engagement. They want involvement in what's going on. So it's really a big, big shift that's taking place. And you can see it in the city and the firms, wealth advisory firms, banks, etc., how they're trying to address this and how some are not doing a very good job of it. And they're going to lose clients in the future clients. Really quite fascinating to see, and we're trying to help with all that. Any questions so far? Okay, so this next section talks about the client type of advice that's needed on a journey, a philanthropic journey. And this is important because it deals with issues of language, because the language has to shift. There was a feasibility study I was doing with a charity on looking at the possibility of setting up an in-house venture philanthropy fund. And so we looked at all their current donors, found someone who was giving a couple £100, did research on them, and found out that they were heavily involved in the city running a venture capital fund. So we got in touch with them, with the charity, and we had a great deal of difficulty getting an appointment. Finally, we just got a Monday morning at 7:30, 20 minutes for breakfast. Not normally ideal for doing a pitch or establishing a relationship. So we got there, and I decided to lead on this. And in effect, I presented a business case, and I used all business language, investment language and stuff. So really shifting from case for support. And the person there was, I don't know if you can see, but was hunched over. All body language was 20 minutes, let's get it over with. We really don't want you here, but I've done it and stuff. So, and as I was talking, body changed and came up. And after a few minutes, he stopped me and he said, "This is the first time someone from a charity has come, and I understand exactly what they're saying." So language and approach is really important. That person became ultimately a super major donor for the charity. You can use this investment return continuum to learn the language, but also to help clients figure out where they want to be. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but in effect, it's a useful tool in your discussions with advisors. And if you want a copy of this, I'm happy to share a PDF, so you can feel free to use it. But basically, it goes from philanthropy and venture philanthropy, which is no financial return on those two, but achieving a societal return. And then it goes from social investment, where there's about 6 billion in the UK invested. That's pretty well trying to have a societal return with some minimal financial return. It varies a bit, but it's iffy. And then impact, SRI, socially responsible, sustainable responsible investment, and ESG investment are just growing like crazy. So people are moving away from traditional. And I think that if you sit down with a donor and you're helping them and their family or whatever figure out where they want to go, sometimes this can be a really helpful tool as part of your conversation with them. The other thing that's really important is creating a sustainable investment strategy. And your role is to profile, match, and guide. Now, this is important because wealthy people want to live their values. It's, again, a shift in many ways. And you can provide, working with advisors, the ability to help them live their values. So again, it comes back to what I was saying at the beginning about values, motivations, ambitions, and vision. So it's discussing that. And it's really surprising how many advisors have trouble having this conversation. And I don't know how many people with the fundraisers, how they deal with this, whether it's comfortable discussion or not. And then once you have that discussion, and there's some really interesting tools out there to help with that. Then there's helping them through the SDGs and priority setting, because a lot more philanthropists and stuff are looking at contextualizing their giving within SDGs. And then from there, you look at multiple approaches, so philanthropy, social investment, impact ESG investment, and then achieving their goals. So it's really important to help with this. So our expertise isn't in the actual final selection of their investment product or their charity, although we help to people choose those, how to choose them. Our expertise is helping advisors, fundraisers, and others how to talk to their clients about their values, etc. This next slide really just goes into a bit of detail about how to, things to keep in mind when you're trying to discuss with clients. So it's understanding what they are. There's questions like, what are you passionate about that you can use? There's different techniques, what's important to you, etc. So I'm not going to go into any detail, but they're there. The last section is really difficult for people who want to be donors, and also difficult for professional advisors to understand. So the landscape is really congested, it's fragmented, difficult to navigate. And when we get, as I say, groups of wealthy people together, when they talk about their initial involvement, they failed. But they still persisted and learned from their failures. Many people just forget it. So this just gives a sense of, in the UK, of all the different vehicles that are out there, how complicated it is for someone just starting off. This next slide is really key. The next two slides is really key to your role. We found that there are 23 distinct services that someone needs on their donor journey. So it's all around planning, implementing, and monitoring, reviewing. And I notice I only have about 3 minutes left. Is that about right, Helen? Okay, so basically you can play a pretty significant role in working with advisors around this. So this one talks about the services. You can be the philanthropy consultant. There's lawyers do certain things, et cetera, but you can be part of that whole process. You have a lot to offer in terms of what's going on. I'm going to sort of skip the next, because the next ones are about language and the case for support and business case and some of the differences. This last slide is really some of the key questions that clients are now asking their advisors and are looking to get some support and stuff from their people who are working with around fundraising departments. Okay, so if you can answer all these questions, you have a good chance of doing well. So what's your experience helping clients with their giving? What services do you provide around this whole thing? Don't you provide? So you go back to that list of 23 services. Can you help your clients develop and implement your philanthropic goals? Well, that's moving away from just being about you and just being about your organization. But again, going back to establishing a relationship, helping them understand what their goals are, to contextualize their giving. And then if you're not the right place, you help them find the right place. And you'll be surprised some of the positive impacts. Okay, how can I involve my family? How will I know my donations make an impact? How do we increase that impact? By the way, there's a big controversy that's starting to develop about whether some charities should be just focusing on impact, but that's another issue we could talk about another time. Given my goals, what are the best vehicles for philanthropic giving? What are the tax implications? What education, training, and resources can you provide? Can you refer me to other advisors? And if you're able to answer these questions, you may not lose a client. I'm going to stop there because there's only 2 minutes left. I'm so sorry it's so fast, but the point I'm trying to make is that if you look at professional advisors and if you can become a trusted advisor to professional advisors, a trusted partner, then you open up a whole new area of resource for you. And if you can shift from just trying to get money out of people, I'm being really gross now and exaggerating your point, to helping them on their donor journey, then I think there's an opportunity for some positive results.
Fascinating. Thank you, John. That was really insightful. We did have some questions about, like practical questions about if you're happy to share some of this information and share the slides, would that be okay?
Sure.
Yeah, cool. I mean, one of the things that kind of sprang to my mind is how willing are the wealth advisors to work with fundraisers? Because I know that fundraisers would be really keen to develop more relationships with the wealth advisors, but because there's been this historically this this kind of attitude of, well, they're just asking me for money. But if the attitude changed, would wealth advisors be interested to work more collaboratively, do you think? Is there an opening for that?
I think so. There's a couple of reasons I say that. One is we run quite extensive training for high value fundraisers in this whole topic. And we never have trouble having a professional advisor attend the training to reinforce the messaging. So that's one thing. The other is as part of the training, we bring an example in from a charity that's done this, and there's other charities that have done as well. Cancer Research UK, when there was a certain staff person there helping to raise funds, that person is no longer there. And so they talk quite a bit about how they get quite extensive number of advisors involved in their whole process, and they become trusted partners with those advisors. So there are some examples, very few, because of course, it's a shift in the culture and behavior of major donor fundraisers that I'm sort of trying to indicate. But I think that they would really welcome it, because as a major donor fundraiser, you have a tremendous amount of knowledge. You know how to assess a charity, you know what some of those things that I showed on the 23 distinct services. You have a lot of value to add. And if I think professional advisors would see that as really a positive thing. So yes, I think that it's open. It's going to take a while, but even people coming to our events, they're sending the wrong level. And so if they sent someone who was actually the major donor fundraiser, senior management, and established relationships, that would help.
Yeah. So how would you approach, if you're a major donor fundraiser for an organization, how would you then approach the wealth advisors? Like how do you make that initial connection?
Well, there's a couple of different approaches. One would be to, well, I'll just say we put on events, and there's other events, people do events and stuff. I'm not trying to push our events, but that's a really good way to meet advisors, and you establish a relationship as you establish a relationship with anyone. The other is your major donors will have advisors. And if you have a good relationship with a major donor, then there's a possibility they'll introduce you to the advisors, get their advisors involved, and then it evolves from there. So if they see you as a trusted advisor with one of their clients, there's no reason why you can't ultimately work towards actually supporting them with other clients. So there's that reason. Your organization, if you have a large endowment, for example, you may have some professional wealth advisors involved, so you could use them to network. So there's a wide variety of ways of actually reaching out to advisors. You can make yourself available to speak at events, not to pitch, but to speak about issues. And because all these advisory firms have events. On Zoom right now, but they have live events. But if you haven't established a relationship with one of the advisors, then there's a good opportunity for you to get invited to speak at the events. There's a whole issue around donor advice funds, which we could spend hours talking about, and how to access donor advice funds, because they're growing. It's a major growth area, and we talk in the training about how to start to deal with them, because they're really hard to break into as a fundraiser. And so we talk about different methods that have been used to do that. So there's different things. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. We, as Chaplain York, we actually held a series of philanthropy briefings where we had 3 or 4 charities not pitching, but actually explaining their causes to wealth advisors. And we did that every month, and they seemed to work really well, where it was done as an education piece. So they would talk about different subjects, and we had environment, we had food, and we had animals in Africa, and lots of different subjects, and it seemed to be quite a nice in. So agreed, there are different ways of approaching it, and there are different events, and not to go in directly with the pitch, I think is really key. So another question that's come from Sylvia.
Let me just add one thing before you do the question. You can, I think you should exploit us as much as you can. I didn't say that out loud, but I mean, we put out a magazine. That magazine goes to over close to 8,000 LinkedIn people our organization has. It goes to a mailing list of 11,000. Significant number of those people are philanthropists, and significant number are advisors. But they also use my LinkedIn, which has over 13,000. So if you put an article in our magazine, then, and a lot of charities do, then that gives really super exposure. If you have research in your organization, send it to us. We put it on our website, then we let everyone on those lists know about it. So again, it's exposure, it creates credibility, et cetera, et cetera. Sorry, Helen.
No worries. I mean, it goes back to the adage that we used before. It's not what you know, it's who you know, right? So use the networks and use philanthropy impact, because that's really what they're, that's what you're there for. So the question was from Sylvia. She asked, can you give examples of the language shift that fundraisers need to use? And I think we get so, as with any industry, we get so used to the jargon that we use internally in our sector that I think it's a good education to have, to say, well, how do we shift that jargon, or how do we learn how to talk to advisors and wealthy, ultra high net worth individuals?
Yeah. We have a lot of stuff that can help you with that. I don't mean to push us, because there's other places as well, but the traditional approach is a case for support. And that works. It's always worked, but there's a real shift taking place. Millennials, women of wealth, they're looking at this as an investment. And what's the return on investment? Not financial return, but what's the return? So that means a business case. And if you can put your business case into 2 pages, I've had to teach a number of organizations how to do this as a consultant. It's not easy because you're so used to thinking in a certain way, but if you can do it, and it's basically broken down into what the problem is or the market need, and then your solution to make your market need, what's your USP, and what's your competitive difference. Do you have the people to make it worth? Because people invest in people, and that's really important. So they're investing either through you because they trust you, or you have people that are trusted within your organization. And then there's the finances, and then there's the ask. What's the investment that's needed? You can see the language is different. What's the financial return? What's the societal return? And then at the end, and only at the end, do you talk about your organization. And you talk about it like we're good guys, we help, and we've sacrificed our lives, et cetera, et cetera. And I sound really cynical, don't I? But it's more, you're a winner. So you're effective, you're financially stable, you're successful, and you have other investors. So it's that kind of thing. And if you can put all that in 2 pages, then you're doing well. And that part of what we teach is how to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good. We've still got the panelists, which is amazing, and thank you for staying with us, everybody. I just want to kind of put it out to the panel, really. If you've got your experiences of working with wealth advisors for your major donor fundraising, if anybody wants to share. We've also got 20 minutes left of this of IFAB, actually. So if anybody has any other questions for John or any of the panels, please do send them through, because we've got, you know, some time to address any of the subjects that we've talked about this morning. But maybe if any of the panel want to share about their experiences working with wealth advisors for their major donor fundraising. Does anybody want to share their experiences?
I've got a problem. I'm in London, but I have another appointment in another part of London in 20 minutes. So
Oh, okay.
Can I just give 5 more minutes and hopefully the taxi gets me there on time?
Yeah, sure. I mean, if you need to leave, John, that's fantastic. We can say
I can wait 5 more minutes if that's
okay, fantastic. Well, maybe we focus our questions on John's discussion quite now, and then once he goes, we can open up the floor to everybody else. So
I'd be really interested in what people's experience is. So if you could record it and send it to me,
sure,
that would be really good. And I'm happy to respond to anything. And you have my contact details, so feel free to give out my email address. And I'm happy to talk to anyone about what they're doing.
I mean, John should hopefully be on Chaplain York Connect, so you guys, so everybody can connect on that as well. And everybody that's taken part and participated will get a copy or have access to a copy of the recording, because it's been recorded, so you can watch it at your leisure over and over again if you want. So another question is coming from Louis. Do you have to be a registered charity to serve as a philanthropy advisor, as you described?
No, there are a number of banks have philanthropy advisors. There's no accreditation, there's no certification, there's no general acceptable standards, but banks have a number of philanthropy advisors. So Coutts, JP Morgan Private Bank, Seahor & Co., HSBC, et cetera, et cetera. But there are few and far between. Outside of that, there are a couple of private ones. So actually, if you're a major donor fundraiser and you're looking for a future career move, there's a potential growing market out there. I wouldn't do it today because it's pretty tough, but something in the next few years if you're looking to do something different. But I think there's going to be a need. So basically, there's not enough philanthropy advisors out there to help, and you can fill that gap as a major donor fundraiser.
Great. I think it's something that Chaplain York can help with as well. We're working to help and improve philanthropy advice through the philanthropy briefings on connecting causes and wealth advisors and having that education piece, because yeah, agreed. I think there is a gap, you know, between the knowledge, and I think maybe it's a language thing, because wealth advisors are scared for charities coming and asking for money when actually they actually need to be educated a little bit more, and vice versa, I think.
Yeah, that's right. There's another question here about women of wealth. I don't know.
Yeah, so could you expand a bit more about the growth of women in wealth and the trends you're seeing?
Okay. As I said earlier, women of wealth are going to control most of the liquid assets. So their approach is really quite different. They want to definitely live their values. Language has shifted. They want to live their values through their philanthropy and also through their investments. And if you understand that whole spectrum, you should have a basic understanding of what the investment thing is. So what is impact investing? What is ESG investing? What's the difference? What's all the issues around sustainability, et cetera, et cetera. So they're pretty focused on that. They want relationships. They don't want to focus on traditional approaches. I think that, and internet and social media and stuff like that are really important processes for them as well. So it's learning a new way to communicate, a new language, and supports. But they know their own minds, but they also need support in helping to develop what they want to do.
I think it'd be quite an interesting research for somebody to look at women of wealth and how it's evolving, and how maybe social media has kind of impacted on that, or how it does. So really quickly, because I know that you need to go, Sarah's interested in hearing more about social impact and return on investment for clients in philanthropy.
Oh God, we don't have 6 hours. It's
Yeah,
really,
about 6
it's really,
minutes.
yeah, it's really complicated. There's multiple ways to measure social impact and return on investment. So pro bono economics, for example, does some really interesting stuff. And there's other groups that also do it. You have to be careful about knowing who your client is or your donor is to figure out what they're looking for. Because again, some of them are really happy with the case for support. And if they can achieve a broad-based impact, then that's great. Some of them are really sophisticated and want pretty serious studies about what's going on. I'm sorry, this is such a long discussion. I just think that it's really important to learn about all these things and to be able to articulate those differences and to put it within the context of your charity. Because sometimes it's really important and other times it's not.
Okay.
And there's
In a
some
nutshell.
kickback. It's really interesting. There's some philanthropists and some others who are basically saying, we think that there should be unrestricted funding. And there should be trust. So Isa Bosch, for example, in Germany, great-granddaughter of Bosch Industries, does something called transformative philanthropy, which involves people in the whole process. Dame Stephanie Shirley's done some of that, and others are doing that. Seahor & Co, for example, their charitable trust focuses a lot on unrestricted funding. So that's moving a bit away from impact and return on investment to actually trusting a key person in an organization that they're going to achieve it, so we're going to give them money to do it. And of course, the money can be used for overheads and a whole range of other things because it's unrestricted. You can do what you want, but there has to be a trust there. And you can build that trust through philanthropy advisors or through others. But you're not going to, like, for example, Seahor & Co, their foundation will not take applications. So it's a more subtle approach, right?
Fascinating. Right, really, really interesting.
Well,
I'm conscious that you have to leave. Is that right?
Yeah. So I've got 11 minutes to get to the other side of London.
Oh, okay. Well, good luck with that.
I'm sorry. I hope that was helpful to everyone.
Thank you so much, John. It's fascinating. We'll we've got your details. We've got you in CMI Connect. We've got your, well, we will have your presentation that we can share with everybody. I just want to say thank you again for a really interesting half an hour or so discussion. Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Okay.
I'm going to open.
Can you send me the comments in the chat? I'd really be interested.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay. I'm really sorry I have to go. Feel free to get in touch. Happy to talk.
Great. Thanks ever so much.
Okay. Thanks. Bye.
If everybody else can stay on, that's great. And we're happy to take further questions to the panel on any of the discussions and any of the presentations we had. So maybe we can continue the conversation a bit on wealth advisors, leading on from what John was talking about. So has anybody had experience, or what people's experience have been with working with wealth advisors for their major donor fundraising? Graham, have you had experience with that?
No, I haven't used them, Helen, myself personally, so sorry, I can't help.
Helen?
Yeah, Nancy, yeah.
Well, I think just to reiterate, the biggest thing is that if you go to any events, whether it's philanthropy, impact, or anywhere else, going up and grabbing somebody who is advising lots of high net worth people, whether they're bankers or lawyers or whatever, and saying, and doing the pitch, as John was saying, that is absolute disaster, because it just makes them not want to come to things with charities there. What you're trying to do is to really get, is to understand, and I'm not quite sure whether I go as far as saying we would be advisors, etc. But what you're trying to do is just to get to know people and to get to know, and for them to know you. because if they've got clients that are interested in, in one-legged donkeys, and you're art museum, you're not going to get that person, that client to be interested in you. But what you do want is that great relationship, so that if somebody does have a client that says, God, do you know any really brilliant art museums? Then, then you're there at first in your mind. But that, I think, is that's the one thing we hear all the time is, how do you keep these people away from us, these fundraisers away from us? We want to get to the bar. We don't want to be hijacked on our way there to say, give to us.
Yeah, I think it's a good point that needs to be made across the board, because if somebody does it, then it kind of gives everybody a bad name, if you like. So I think we just need to be all very cautious, because there's a need for it. We know that, we've learned that, and Nancy and I have been doing the philanthropy briefings as well, mostly this year. And we know that there is interest in it, so we just need to all together as a collective be very cautious about how we work with advisors and not scare people off, because we need them, they need us. We just need to be tread carefully on this tricky road. So yeah. Anybody else?
Sorry, can I just clarify? I think, in all fairness, I don't work with client advisors per se, but when you network within your community, whether it's from the legal fraternity with our 1748 Society Legacy Club, or working with people who know other high net worth individuals, we are in effect networking with clients, service of client advisors. So I don't see myself as focusing in on them as an entity, which maybe I should, but I'm always looking at our database and people we work with, what connections they've got. And as I say, lawyers are one area where I have had success, with talking to them about the school or whoever I'm working for. But in that case, often they are an alum of the school, or there's a connection already there. So you're not cornering them at a networking session. You are meeting them as one of your community. Yeah,
makes sense. And Leslie, you must have had, or I assume, but not correctly, have you had experience of dealing with wealth advisors in this capacity?
No, not. Certainly is a lot of food for thought, and it's something we should really be expanding on. I think it could be hugely beneficial, and I think it needs a dedicated, focused approach, and not something that was sporadic, but that it was well considered. I did want to just touch on the articulating social impact and return on investment, because I see that becoming more and more important for clients, and it's so useful to document, as I mentioned earlier, the things that you do and the work that you do, because people really, when they see that their rand is spent wisely and that their investment is making a difference in communities or to people's lives, you gain donor confidence and you have donor retention, and I can't just emphasize the importance of that, because it's easier cultivating and growing that donor well-being rather than finding someone new. So I would place a lot of emphasis on that.
Brilliant, well said. Christine said that she's used wealth advisors in the past and it worked very well for them. She's from a music charity. It's an opportunity for her to connect their clients with the music charity. So that worked very well for her. So I think there's an opportunity, and I think there's a lot of food for thought, as Leslie said, from what John was saying. And Sarah also quite rightly said it's important, it's helpful for everybody to understand the importance of questions they're asking. Oh, and Sylvie's just written a really long thing. We are running out of time, so really I want to take this opportunity again to say thank you to the panelists and to all the speakers that have attended today and have contributed to IFAB 2021, the kickoff. This is day one. So tomorrow we've got the US, and then on Thursday we are talking about the same subject, so stewardship, cultivation, prospect research in Asia. Thank you to all the attendees. You've been amazing with all your comments and your questions and all the feedback. I think it's really made for a very dynamic morning. It's not just us talking at you, it's actually interactive, which is fantastic. So thank you for all of your connections. We hope you've gained practical philanthropic skills and increased your international fundraising and helped to broaden your successes, we hope. So please remember, do stay in touch with Chaplain New York Connect, which you all are connected to. You can network and you can increase your global colleagues through the platform. You'll be receiving an email with links to today's session for your references back to what we've been discussing, and along with our 2022 events as well, which are coming up. So we've got roundtables and plenary briefings planned for 2022 too. So thank you once again to everybody. We hope to see you again in the future and to see all of our wonderful panelists and wonderful speakers. And thank you for insightful, educational and wonderful morning. So thank you to everybody.